Well, hello and good evening. This is Sky News Live from Westminster on the day a Prime Minister under intense Brexit pressure refused to back down. In the face of resignations, rebellions and a threat to her future as leader, Theresa May vowed to see her pull-out proposal through as she fought to survive one of her darkest days in power. This morning, Downing Street was dominated by drama. The Brexit Secretary quit, then the Work and Pensions Secretary followed, all as the PM prepared for a House of Commons bruising over her controversial draft text. Right now, her future hangs in the balance amid speculation that momentum is building behind a no-confidence vote.
Theresa May already 10 rounds into her latest Brexit battle before she even began this hastily convened early evening press conference.
I'm going to do my job of getting the best deal for Britain. I'm going to do my job of getting a deal that is in the national interest. When the vote comes before the House of Commons, MPs will be doing their job. They will need to look at that a deal. They will need to consider the vote of the British people to leave the European Union and our duty to deliver on that vote. And of course, they will be held to account by their constituents for the decisions that they take.
After a day in which her party and government seemed to be unravelling, the Prime Minister appealed directly to voters. And with a message to those MPs tonight trying to depose her, she's staying put.
I believe that this is a deal which does deliver that, which is in the national interest. And am I going to see this through? Yes.
But unfortunately for the Prime Minister's, others weren't. The day started with none other than her Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab tendering his resignation. It was quickly followed by the Work and Pensions Secretary Esther McVey. All of that happening before she'd even got out of her own front door. The Prime Minister still soldiering on, braced for impact in the Commons.
I've been committed day and night to delivering on the result of the referendum and ensuring the UK leaves the EU absolutely and on time. I know it's been a frustrating process. It has forced us to confront some very difficult issues. But a good Brexit, a Brexit which is in the national interest, is possible. We have persevered and have made a decisive breakthrough.
But in reality, she'd hit a wall on all sides, no support from Labour.
The government simply cannot put to Parliament this half-baked deal that both the Brexit Secretary and his predecessor have rejected.
Her DUP allies all but confirming that their supply and confidence deal now dead.
She clearly doesn't listen. And can I say today that this House now has a clear choice and every member in it? We stand up for the United Kingdom, the whole of the United Kingdom, the integrity of the United Kingdom, or we vote for a vassal state with the breakup of the United Kingdom. That's the choice.
Her own team full of menace too as they mauled their leader, leaving no doubt she was now facing a full-blown leadership crisis.
These 585 pages are a testament to broken promises, failed negotiations and abject capitulation to the EU.
This backstop is completely intolerable, and I feel confident that even in the unlikely event that legislation for it reaches this House, it will be ferociously opposed.
Over 80 Tory backbenchers, well it's 84 now and it's going up by the hour, will vote against it. So I plead with you to accept the political reality of the situation you now face.
This leading Brexiteer all but confirming he was going to try and topple her in a no-confidence vote.
As what my right honourable friend says and what my right honourable friend does no longer match, should I not write to my right honourable friend, the member for Altrincham and Sale West?
48 letters needed to call a vote. MPs convinced it's now only a question of when, not if. After all that drama, a theatrical press conference outside Parliament, successors already being mooted.
Who do you want me to start with? You've got Boris Johnson and David Davis, and you've got Dominic Raab and Esther McVey, you've got Penny Mordaunt. You have streams of talent within the Conservative Party who would be very capable of leading a proper Brexit.
The former Brexit Secretary who set off this morning's chain of resignations, insisting he still wanted Mrs May to continue, but admitting he did not know if she could.
Do you think she will be Prime Minister then on Brexit Day next year?
I certainly hope so, and I'll be supporting her to make a success of Brexit and make a success of her premiership.
But hope is different from confidence, right?
Well, I don't know. I can't predict. There's tumultuous, uncertain times.
Frantic briefing in all directions in Westminster today, but some staying out of the fray. Brexiteers Michael Gove, Penny Mordaunt and Andrea Leadsom all still on resignation watch. The Prime Minister ending the day insisting that she is still very much in the game.
One of my cricket heroes was always Geoffrey Boycott. And what did you know about Geoffrey Boycott? Geoffrey Boycott stuck to it and he got the runs in the end. Thank you.
Still batting on tonight, but the pitch ever more hostile. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Well, she stood defiant inside Downing Street, but beyond the famous black door of number 10, the attacks on Theresa May's leadership and threats to her future are intensifying. Within coming hours or days, the Prime Minister could face a no-confidence vote from her own party in a move that would trigger a leadership contest. So far, she isn't showing any sign of standing down, so how can MPs force her out of the top job? Well, Conservative Party rules say a leadership election can be called if 15% of Tory MPs write to the chairman of the 1922 committee, which is made up of backbench Conservative members of Parliament, saying they no longer have faith in the leader. So 48 out of the party's current 318 MPs would need to hold that view. Once that number is reached, leadership nominations are called for, and a candidate needs the support of at least 2 MPs to get onto the ballot paper. If there is only one candidate, they will be declared the winner. But if multiple names are put forward, voting rounds begin. In each round, the candidate with the least votes is knocked out until only 2 remain. Conservative members then have a final vote, and the winner becomes the new leader. So let's return then to our Deputy Political Editor, Beth Rigby, who joins me now. She's fighting on a number of fronts. One is Parliament, not seeming to like her deal. The second one, of course, and only Sir Graham Brady knows, is how many people are stacking up to trigger that leadership contest.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Anna. And as you were saying, 48 letters need to go in. Only Sir Graham Brady knows the real amount. But there were definite moves today by Brexiteers to try and push her over the edge and tip other people into sending those letters in. Jacob Rees-Mogg, as you saw, publicly said in the Commons that he would. He then released that letter. Steve Baker said that he'd already sent a letter and he released that. I understand that another Brexiteer is putting in another letter tomorrow morning, and they are quite intent, a group of them at least, on triggering this leadership or confidence vote. Now, I should also say that the ERG, that's the Brexiteer wing in the party, that group, are quite split on it. There are a number of May loyalists as well, who, although they want to change the policy, don't think this is the moment to change the leader. This afternoon, around here, with all the MPs, every single MP I asked was pretty confident that there would be a leadership ballot, or at least a vote of confidence. This evening, after that press conference, there's a sense maybe from some of her supporters that she might just have calmed things down again. And from a Brexiteer point of view, it is quite high risk to trigger this leadership or this vote of confidence, because once they do, and then she stands, and we assume that not more than, she needs 158 of her MPs to say, yeah, actually, can you please go? No one really expects that to happen. She can then stay in post for another year. They cannot trigger another ballot for another year. So some Brexiteers say, hold back and just wait. But there is a danger that it could just happen by accident, that unilaterally people put enough letters in that it tips over the edge. And certainly a number of MPs still think that it's inevitable that she will face that confidence vote. And we're surprised, actually, that she didn't jump the gun and call for one herself just to try and kill it off.
Yes, there's a sense here, isn't there, that we're in the calm before the continuing storm. What about Michael Gove? What word of him? Was he offered the Brexit job? Has he said no? With caveats? So
Michael Gove went to ground today and everyone noticed his absence. He did have a family matter that colleagues said, a personal matter that he had to deal with, but he was back in the game and into action this evening. I was told that he had been tapped up by the Prime Minister to replace Dominic Raab as the Brexit Secretary. You know, she has to have a Brexiteer in that position, and he would be the one, I would argue, that would carry most weight now in her cabinet. So he would have been a good heavy hitter to get in to steady the ship, so to speak. But he apparently had a number of conditions, and he wanted to have the authority to go back to Brussels and renegotiate bits and pieces of that withdrawal agreement deal that she brought to Cabinet yesterday. Look, Dominic Raab, in the interview he did with me, was really clear that he had to resign because he could not stand by that agreement, that he wanted her to change course or allow him to tweak it a bit. She said no, and that he couldn't stay in Cabinet if she wouldn't change course. So it would have been a bit surprising if, having lost Dominic Raab and taken that hit and then the kind of domino effect that then triggered, if she then said, well, Michael, I'm so desperate, yeah, you do what you want. So I think if she had done that and allowed Michael to come back in on his terms, it would have just shown how absolutely, utterly weak she was in government. So it's probably smarter for her not to do it. The big question is, who will be her Brexit secretary? There has been some talk about whether she just folds the department. I did ask Dominic Raab that when I went to his house earlier today, and he didn't think that that would happen. He thought the department would carry on, not least because it is dealing with no-deal Brexit preparation.
She did say she was a bit busy today to start filling some of the holes of those resignations, didn't she? Beth, thank you very much indeed.
Good evening from Downing Street. After a day of Brexit turbulence for the government, when the Prime Minister set out to answer her many critics inside the Conservative Party, she insisted she was determined to carry on, promoting her widely criticised plan to take Britain out of the European Union. 2 cabinet ministers are among those who have resigned from the government today. It all started at 9 o'clock this morning, when Dominic Raab became the second Brexit secretary to leave that job, saying there were fatal flaws in Mrs May's plans. His departure was followed by the Work and Pension Secretary, Esther McVey, who also said she could not support the draft withdrawal agreement. A number of junior ministers also stepped down, including Suella Braverman from the Brexit Department and Shailesh Vara. At 10:30, Theresa May went to the Commons, where she spent 3 hours defending her plan. But she was roundly criticised, not least by MPs on her own side. And following that statement, the leading Brexit supporter, Jacob Rees-Mogg, submitted a letter of no confidence in Mrs May's leadership. The Prime Minister then held a news conference at Downing Street, insisting her plan was the best one available and that she would see it through. Well, we will have all the latest developments and reaction, with more details of the Prime Minister's plan and what it could mean for millions of households and for businesses. We start with this report on a very turbulent day from our political editor, Laura Kunsberg.
There seems to be a certain interest in today's proceedings.
On exactly the spot where Theresa May took on the job of Prime Minister.
Rather than in a leave direction.
The march of the Brexiteers, trying to walk her to the exit.
What we need is a leader who will say to the European Union, it is impossible to divide up the United Kingdom. It is impossible to agree to a situation where we have a perpetual customs union.
What do you say to some of our viewers and listeners who think this is self-indulgent? You are just complaining about what's a practical compromise, and this is about ambition of Brexiteers rather than what's good for the country.
Well, it's nothing to do with ambition of Brexiteers. It is about ambition for Brexit and the country. Leaving the European Union is the most fantastic opportunity for the United Kingdom.
The ugly fight over how we leave the European Union.
Yes! Yes!
Now an open battle in the Tory party for who runs the country. What are we all to make of this warfare playing out in front of our eyes? Those who still back her exasperated.
Stop rocking the boat, stop wrecking, otherwise this will prove an historic, disastrous period, not just for the Conservative Party and the government, but for the country more widely.
Haven't we passed the point where it's credible for her to be able to turn this round?
No. I think she remains our only hope.
Good morning, Minister.
That hope dashed by this man, the Brexit Secretary who quit and didn't make the journey to work today.
Morning, Minister. Are you going to resign?
Do you have confidence in the Prime Minister?
Well, this woman, the Work and Pension Secretary, who gave up her ministerial folders too. 7 members of the government have gone today.
Well, thank you and good morning.
Minister, were you in tears last night?
In protest at the Brexit compromise. But she's still there, even with resignations and open revolt. Can she stay? She'll try.
Serving in high office is an honour and privilege. It is also a heavy responsibility. That is true at any time, but especially when the stakes are so high. And negotiating the UK's withdrawal from the EU after 40 years and building from the ground up a new and enduring relationship for the good of our children and grandchildren is a matter of the highest consequence. My approach throughout has been to put the national interest first. I do not judge harshly those of my colleagues who seek to do the same, but who reach a different conclusion. I'm sorry that they've chosen to leave the government, and I thank them for their service. But I believe with every fibre of my being that the course I have set out is the right one for our country and all our people.
And Prime Minister, is it not the case now that you are in office, but you're not really in power?
I'm going to do my job of getting the best deal for Britain. I'm going to do my job of getting a deal that is in the national interest. When the vote comes before the House of Commons, MPs will be doing their job. And am I going to see this through? Yes.
She's just made it plain she wants to stay, but she may have to go. With her party in revolt, colleagues departing, some organising to try to shove her from office. This decision is not Theresa May's alone. This could be a gale that sweeps through in a couple of days, or a storm that brings the Prime Minister and her government down. And she can't ignore this. Listen to the now departed Brexit Secretary condemning the deal. Dozens and dozens of his colleagues hold this view.
I fought very hard to get a deal that I could in good heart and good conscience take to the country and to my colleagues. But actually, if you look at what's being proposed now, it is not only, in my view, damaging to the economy, but it's impossible to reconcile with the promises we made at the last election.
Now, would you forgive some of our viewers, including lots of people who might have voted for Brexit, who'd be really angry at people like you who campaigned for Brexit? Now it gets difficult, now it gets really hard, and you walk away.
There are risks in any course we take at this historic juncture, but I think the worst possible outcome when you balance the risks is to give in to the EU's blackmail and accept a deal bad for the economy and devastating for trust in our democracy.
Statement, the Prime Minister.
And beyond departed colleagues, is it realistic to expect Theresa May can get her version of Brexit through Parliament?
I do not pretend that this has been a comfortable process, or that either we or the EU are entirely happy with all of the arrangements that have been included within it. Mr. Speaker, when I first became Prime Minister in 2016, there was no ready-made blueprint for Brexit. Many people said it could simply not be done. I've never accepted that.
But watch her colleagues, half of them cheering, half of them arms crossed, hardly knowing where to look. Then 57 minutes of bitter complaint after bitter complaint.
This is not the deal the country was promised, and Parliament cannot, and I believe will not, accept a false choice between this bad deal and no deal. The government must now withdraw this half-baked deal, which is clear does not have the backing of the Cabinet, this Parliament or the country as a whole.
The Prime Minister is well known for her dancing. Sadly, having seen the withdrawal agreement, it's now clear whose tune she's been dancing to.
And listen now. Sit down, you disloyal twerp.
Sit down, you disloyal twerp.
Not what you normally hear in the Commons. But on all sides, it was devastating.
I could today stand here and take the Prime Minister through the list of promises and pledges that she made to this House and to us privately about the future of Northern Ireland in the future relationship with the EU. But I fear it would be a waste of time, since she clearly doesn't listen.
Would she at least today undertake not to rule out taking this back to the British people and having a people's vote?
If honourable members opposite would put their hands up if they actually do support the Prime Minister on this set of proposals. Not one.
Then eventually, after an hour, some messages of support, but far from congratulations.
I want to pay tribute to the fact that the Prime Minister did get agreement in Cabinet. And can she reassure us that regardless of however many ministerial resignations there are between now and that vote, that the agreement will come to Parliament?
Away from the Westminster bubble, we must remember to consider these vast communities when we consider the outcomes today. And we know that it is no deal that will be most damaging to them.
But like it or not, it is in this circus that the government's future will be decided.
Oh, have I done it again?
In a moment of the absurd, Theresa May cracking a joke during an intense crisis. The Prime Minister at the mercy of others, but still in place.
Back here in Downing Street, and Laura is with me. Laura, the Prime Minister's message couldn't have been clearer. She's going to fight on. She believes in this deal. Where is she then with members of the Cabinet, so many of whom were being sceptical yesterday?
Well, of course, if you don't have a Cabinet, you don't really have a government. And tonight things are very fluid still. At 6 o'clock, we saw the International Development Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, go in to see the Prime Minister. We know she's unhappy, but tonight she is still in her job. But the question of what's happening to Michael Gove, who right now is the Environment Secretary and of course was one of the main cheerleaders for leaving the EU in the first place, is rather unclear. Now, I've been told he was offered the job of Brexit Secretary to replace Dominic Raab. I've been told he turned that down because he said to the Prime Minister, I'll do it, but only if I can go back to the deal. And he is now understood to be questioning whether or not he should quit altogether. But I'm also told that Michael Gove and other ministers are discussing amongst their small group whether or not they should collectively try to push the Prime Minister to change or to tweak some of her deal.
What kind of message will that be delivering if they can do that to the backbenches? Because we heard lots of critical voices today.
Absolutely, and I think any sign from senior Brexiteers that they are continuing to try to shake the ship will be encouragement for those MPs who have begun to put their letters in calling for Theresa May to move on. Now, they have not yet reached their magic number of 48. That's what would trigger a vote of no confidence in her. They do believe they will be able to hit that target by late over this weekend or perhaps Monday. But for them, frankly, as for everyone in Westminster, and probably plenty of our viewers too, what is putting doubt in their mind is the question of, in the end, how will this extremely uncertain situation really be resolved?
Laura, we'll talk again before the end of the programme. Thanks very much. Laura Kuenssberg there for us. Meanwhile, in Brussels today, the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, has formally handed over that 500-plus page draft withdrawal agreement to the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk. Let's talk to our Europe editor, Katja Adler, who's in Brussels for us. And Katja, we've heard time and again today in the Parliament here that some people think a different deal is possible, that somebody could go back to Brussels and get a better deal than the one they've got. What's the view there?
Well, I have to say here in Brussels, everybody is looking at the UK intrigued, fascinated, open-mouthed. One of my high-level contacts described what they saw in the UK today as a political horror show. But overly concerned EU leaders don't seem to be. We heard from the German foreign minister, for example, this afternoon, who said a strong reaction in the UK was to be expected because, after all, he said, in the UK, people feel very strongly about Brexit and therefore a Brexit deal as well. You see, Hugh, two EU leaders, they see Theresa May as their main interlocutor. So cabinet ministers, Brexit secretaries can come and go, but she is still standing for now. And today she was sounding very determined. And so EU leaders have cleared their diary for the 25th of November. That's when they want to sit down with the Prime Minister and sign on the dotted line of a Brexit deal. And frankly, in EU circles, there's a sigh of relief at the thought of that, because EU leaders feel they've got enough uncertainty around them with the politics in Italy, in Poland, in Hungary, Donald Trump in the White House. They'd like to put this chapter behind them. There is zero appetite here, zero, Hugh, to rip up this withdrawal agreement and start all over again. But you don't see Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron rushing to the microphones and TV cameras to say this, because they know that won't help the situation in the UK at all.
Good evening from Downing Street, still home to Theresa May, for now at least. This famous door has been the backdrop to many a drama over the years, but few in modern times can match what is playing out now for sheer visceral edge-of-your-seat tension. Where will it all end? For the Prime Minister, it has been another brutal day. This morning, her new Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, a whole 4 months into the job, resigned over her and arguably his Brexit deal. Work and Pension Secretary Secretary Esther McVey, and a slew of junior members of the government followed him out shortly afterwards. Then came a 3-hour drubbing by MPs in the Commons over the terms of that self-same deal. It was, to be honest, pretty relentless. Most people here think she will face a no-confidence vote in the coming days, and even if she wins, few believe she can really get her deal through the Commons. But one thing you can say for sure tonight, she is still hanging in there.
There are bad days, and then there are days like the Prime Minister had today. Cabinet resignations assaulted from all sides for her historic Brexit plan, so she summoned the press together to say,
serving in high office is an honour and privilege. It is also a heavy responsibility.
Yes, it sounded like she was about to quit, but far from it. For her, it's Brexit deal or bust.
I believe that this is a deal which does deliver that, which is in the national interest. And am I going to see this through? Yes.
Prime Minister, you've said that your deal is in the national interest, but your party is deeply divided on it, perhaps more divided than any of us have ever seen. Are you prepared to risk the breakup of your party?
Members of Parliament across my party will look at that deal, will recognise the importance of delivering on the vote of the British people.
Well, one member of her own government, quite an important one, the minister actually in charge of Brexit, looked at that deal last night and couldn't stomach it. He quit rather than turn up for work.
Well, I felt the proposed deal with the EU suffered two fatal flaws. The first one is the rather predatory terms being proposed by the EU, which I feel would threaten the integrity of the United Kingdom. And secondly, in relation to the so-called backstop, basically what that would do is indefinitely, if not permanently, lock us into a regime which I believe would be damaging to the economy but devastating the public trust in our democracy.
Now, the normal etiquette after a resignation is that Tories are nice to each other. Well, the old rules don't apply.
I'm not taking lessons on standing up for our United Kingdom from carpetbaggers. I'm not impressed by his latter-day commitment to the Union. I'm sure this is more about manoeuvring and leadership.
Morning, Minister. Are you going to resign?
This Brexiter, the Work and Pensions Secretary Esther McVey, was tipped to quit after she broke all the rules at Wednesday's Cabinet meeting by asking for a show of hands to show how many ministers hate the PM's Brexit plan. And quit she duly did, saying in her resignation letter that the deal you put before the Cabinet yesterday doesn't honour the result of the referendum. Indeed, it doesn't meet the tests you set from the outset of your premiership. She said, I cannot defend this and I cannot vote for this deal. The PM, here driving to the Commons, also saw 5 other members from her more junior team quit.
The Prime Minister!
But when she spoke to MPs, she warned what the consequences would be of rejecting her plan, although not all MPs were even remotely scared.
We can choose to leave with no deal, we can risk no Brexit at all, or we can choose...
The government must now withdraw this half-baked deal, which is clear does not have the backing of the Cabinet, this Parliament, or the country as a whole.
Then from her own side, one after another, Brexiters and Remainers lined up to savage her.
This backstop is completely intolerable, and I feel confident that even in the unlikely event that legislation for it reaches this House, it will be ferociously opposed.
The harsh, cruel truth of it is that this is not the promised deal.
These 585 pages are a testament to broken promises.
And furious DUP MPs from Northern Ireland seem close to terminating their alliance with the Tories that allows her to govern.
The choice is now clear. We stand up for the United Kingdom, the whole of the United Kingdom, the integrity of the United Kingdom, or we vote for a vassal state with the breakup of the United Kingdom.
So one of the Tory Brexit rebels, their leader in fact, said the time had come for the party to depose the Prime Minister, and he's written a letter withdrawing his confidence in her.
This is about not having confidence in the current leader and believing that the deal simply does not work.
Now, by tomorrow, enough Tory MPs, 48 or more, may well have written similar letters, and she'll have to win a vote of MPs to survive. This former minister could replace her.
If we don't deliver the Brexit that the British people voted for, then the British people will punish us. They probably punish the entire political class, but they'll particularly punish the government.
And as if the Prime Minister hasn't suffered enough, her Brexiter Agriculture Secretary, one of the original leaders of the Leave campaign, Michael Gove, is tonight agonising about whether also to quit. Robert Peston, News at 10.
So the obvious question is, what next? If enough of Theresa May's own MPs decide they want a change of leader, there are clear rules governing the process. Under Conservative Party bylaws, 15% of Tory MPs have to write to the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady, to say they no longer have confidence in the leader. With 315 MPs, to save you doing the maths, that amounts clearly to 48 letters. And once that number is reached, Sir Graham then triggers a vote of confidence in Theresa May amongst all her MPs, probably as early as next week. To pass this, Mrs May needs a simple majority, 158 MPs. But if she fails to get that number, then the PM will have to resign and a leadership contest will be triggered.
It is of considerable importance that politicians stick to their commitments. There seems little point allowing the captain to continue running the ship towards the rocks. I have lost confidence in Theresa May as leader and British Prime Minister. They were writing to this man, Graham Brady.
I never know what to expect.
Who chairs the 1922 committee. He won't say how many letters he's had, but Jacob Rees-Mogg was added to the pile today. Will others follow? Well, this MP says he'll put in a letter tomorrow, using decidedly unparliamentary language about Mrs May's deal.
We have told the Prime Minister privately for months that we would not vote for it. But unfortunately, no one was listening at the other end of the conversation. And I have told my own whip, politely, I've known her for years, I will not vote for Chequers if she puts a shotgun in my mouth.
Another MP was less blunt, but her message was much the same.
Every time I asked the Prime Minister a question, I wasn't getting a straight answer. And in the end, I just felt, I'm sorry, I've had enough of this. It was sheer frustration.
But others predicted Mrs May would win any confidence vote.
I think there's probably every chance that there will be enough letters that go in that ask for a leadership contest. I think the Prime Minister will win that leadership contest, and I think that she will stay. She's shown remarkable reserves of resilience in the course of the last couple of years.
One minister accused the rebels of having a secret agenda.
All they are going to do is act as wreckers, because they do not have an alternative deal which is deliverable. They are probably deliberately pushing us into no deal, which is deceitful because they have not said so. And so all they are going to do is put at risk the government, the party and the national interest.
Meanwhile, the chief whip appealed for unity.
Some people find this decision very tough, but the Prime Minister will not be bullied.
But his attempt to bring some order to the Tory party is failing, as MPs with wildly different views on Brexit fight it out on the airwaves and behind closed doors. Libby Vina, News at 10, Westminster.
For the EU's negotiators, there is only disappointment in seeing their hard-won deal being torn apart in Britain's Parliament. They have nonetheless earmarked a week on Sunday for a summit of the other 27 EU countries to give the deal their seal of approval. And there was a message from Germany's Angela Merkel to Brexiters back here who think they can get a better deal. Forget it, this is the only one you're going to get.
They certainly see this as a done deal. Chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier handing over the fruits of 18 months' work to Council President Donald Tusk this morning. They had waited last night until the Cabinet in London gave it the thumbs up before publishing. Now, as far as the EU is concerned, the next step is a special summit to endorse it, if the UK is still on board by then.
If nothing extraordinary happens, we will hold a European Council meeting in order to finalise and formalise the Brexit agreement. It will take place on Sunday, the 25th of November.
Well, plenty extraordinary has happened since then, and after a rash of morning resignations, Tusk was quietly talking up the only alternative to this agreement he would like to see.
We are also prepared for a no-deal scenario. But of course we are best prepared for a no-Brexit scenario.
In the corridors of the Commission, officials have been playing down any chance of renegotiating the deal. Both sides have exhausted their room for manoeuvre, said one. And it's not just Brussels. Germany's Angela Merkel made it clear she has no interest in reopening this process once again. For me, therefore, she said, there's no question about whether we're going to negotiate any further. Both negotiating partners have an agreement, possibly the final withdrawal agreement. And she's not alone. In several European capitals, there's a view that not enough conditions have been attached to Britain's continuing in the customs union, on fishing rights and on preventing Britain post-Brexit from undercutting the European market. There is no mood for further concessions. For the time being, despite events in London, the EU are continuing towards a summit in 10 days' time. The President and Chief Negotiator of the European Parliament getting their copies this afternoon. The ambassadors of the EU 27 will meet to discuss it in the morning, but always with an eye on what's happening across the Channel. James Mace, News at 10, Brussels.
There certainly aren't. I haven't heard it called the Brexit black hole before, but it might stick. Robert Lee Weeks there. Robert is here, as you can see, to talk to me about the Brexit black hole. I'm tempted to say, boy, oh boy, yeah, boy, oh boy, what a day. But that's not really a question. What happens next? A no confidence vote? Do you think the letters are in? Enough of them?
So I don't think quite enough are in, but my expectation is that a few more go in tomorrow, and that tips them over the crucial 48 number. Now, Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, might not announce tomorrow that there's going to be a confidence vote because the House isn't sitting, but the latest he could announce it would be on Monday. And so then we get this extraordinary test of the Prime Minister's authority, her ability to lead. I think she probably leads, but look, it's a secret ballot.
Yeah.
Frankly, vast numbers of MPs, whatever happens, don't expect her to be in power for, let's say, much more than a year. So they don't have to suck up to her. So I suspect the protest...
Quite a moment, wouldn't it, to be ditching your leader at this point in time? Isn't that a big step for a lot of middle-of-the-road Tory MPs?
It's a huge step, but don't underestimate the extent to which they passionately believe that they are betraying them, their party, the country with her version of Brexit, and they perhaps naively think that they could accelerate the process of an election to perhaps 2 weeks, and that would still be enough to go back to the EU and demand what they would regard as a better deal. As I say, that may be naive, and the hope of the Prime Minister and advisers in there is that on Sunday week, when she gets her deal ratified by the EU, she is hoping that the likes of Chancellor Merkel, the likes of President Macron and other leaders will also say, by the way, Britain, it's this deal or no deal, that, you know, you may naively think somebody else can come back and ask for a better one, but you can whistle for it.
It's a nice phrase. Okay, Robert, thank you. Indeed.